It's exciting to talk to you today because now we're entering your season where you are the expert. I admitted earlier this week, this is the least I know about the draft in a very long time because the Broncos have been playing so late into the season, into the postseason now. So, Fran, I want to ask you a very basic question. What position are the Broncos taking at number 30 right now?
To me, I know a lot of people are putting it, linebacker, at that spot. That's huge because this time of year for mock drafts, for a lot of analysts out there, for a lot of writers, insiders, it's like, all right, how do I get this player into my mock draft? And it's just there's a sense of routine and groupthink that falls into place. So we often see Georgia linebacker, CJ Allen. We see the guys at that position kind of fall to the Denver Broncos in a lot of these mocks. I really feel like it'll be an offensive playmaker. I'm looking at a pass catcher. It wouldn't shock me if they went line of scrimmage as well, on either side, knowing Sean Payton and his history. So to me, that's kind of where my head's been at. But I'm excited to see how that, some of the wins behind the scenes, how they kind of change here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about linebacker in particular, by the time the draft comes around, the Broncos aren't going to have a need at linebacker. Right. That's just not the kind of, when you have what we think is the best defense in the NFL, you don't leave such an important position to a potential rookie at that point. And that doesn't mean you can't draft a guy to develop and use later if Alex Singleton's back or whatever it may be. But I totally agree. If they do go with a pass catcher, we're all interested in the tight ends, I think, more so than the receivers, although there's obviously room for a receiver as well. But who would you look at? Who would be the ideal target there?
I think if we're talking round one, it's really only one name that I think we're talking about that high, and it's going to be Kenyon Siddiq from Oregon. My guess is that would require a trade up, which we know Sean Payton is not afraid of. Now, he might have to convince George Payton to make that kind of move, but I think when you're looking at Sean Payton, the way that he's operated in the past, he has not been bashful about giving away picks and moving up to go and get his guy and be aggressive. I think that Siddiq is like the prototypical, he's the Joker. Yeah, he is the guy that we spent so often, so much time last year talking about that kind of player in this offense. Siddiq is the true definition of that archetype. So I think when you're looking at Kenyon Siddiq, that's the player you're looking at as a first round joker. There are a handful of other guys I think we talk about, but I don't know that any of them are going to be going in the latter stages of round one where we're talking about with the Denver Broncos right now. Last year in the draft, you had Colston Loveland, you had Tyler Warren, and then it was Mason Taylor who went in the top 40 to the New York Jets in the second round. I think we're probably not going to have three guys go that high. I think it's really going to be Siddiq, and there's going to be another little bit of a drop off, and then we get into the rest of the group there later in day two and then through day three. It's a great class, but that's where the depth is. That's where the strength of it is. It's more like tight end twos, tight end threes that you're taking in the middle rounds and late rounds.
Let's talk a little receiver because my thought on the biggest need for the Broncos is elite playmaker. And I think it can come from the receiver position, but I'm worried about finding that at the end of the first round. So who in your mind could fit that mold to be the Broncos version of JSN or Puka Nacua? Just one of those guys where it's just like, hey, we're trying to get the ball to this guy all day long because we know good things happen every time he gets it.
Yeah, I mean, that's where it's going to be really fascinating, RK, because, we've seen that the way that Sean Payton has built some of these receiving cores, not just here in Denver, but then down in New Orleans was, all right, you got some big oak trees, right? You get the Marcus Colstons, the Tim Patricks, we saw last year, day two, go out and you get Bryant. I think when you look at the way that he has attacked that position, you're going to get those bigger bodies. And so I think of Denzel Boston at Washington as a guy that would make a lot of sense and fit that archetype. But we also saw that they'll go and get a Marvin Mims. He's had some of those more explosive, shifty players, during his time in New Orleans as well. And I think that when you're if you're shopping in that aisle, Casey Concepcion is a name from Texas A&M that I absolutely would keep an eye on. He's a guy that's got punt return ability. He's great at yards after catch, but then also one of the best pure separators in this class as well. So to me, I'll be interested. And this is honestly one of the things I'm doing this weekend before I make the trip out to Indianapolis. I always do it the weekend before I get out there, just so it's all front of mind, is I write a question or two down to ask head coaches and GMs at their press conferences and try and bounce around and ask as many of them as I can. I know I'm not going to get to everybody, but I think the topic of wide receiver will probably be at the front of mind for me if we get the chance to talk to Sean Payton next week.
I absolutely love that, Fran. Want to continue, by the way, the Toyota chat, everyone absolutely loves you already because the first thing you said was Broncos need a playmaker, and man, does Broncos country agree with you that. And so I want to ask you about Kenyon Siddiq, go back to him really quick because you mentioned the gap between him and everyone else. Is he worth taking in the first round for the Broncos? Maybe even a trade up. Is he that special, or is it best for the Broncos to wait until the third, fourth round and maybe get someone that they end up developing and isn't an instant impact guy this year?
I think the gap is that wide between him and the rest of this class, Zach. And I think when you look at the way that he is able to impact the game, I mean, he is a top level athlete and pass catcher, like all the upside things we talk about in terms of receiving production and things like that. Like he could do all of that, but then he is a trained killer as a blocker. Like you watch him on the move. Now he's undersized and then he's like 6'3", 250. We'll get the official measurements next week. So he is not hand in the dirt, Adam Troutman, you line up next to the tackle and block defensive ends, at the point of attack on power. He is, hey, we're going to line him up as a wing. We're going to put him in as a slot. We're going to get him on the move. And then he's going to be like a lead blocker out in space. We're going to block him up on safeties. We're going to do a lot of those things. He's awesome in that role. If you go into the Die Hard draft guide and you go through down to the bottom, I've got like all the video highlights of these players. And honestly, you go like all through the season, there are more highlights on social media from him as a blocker than as a pass catcher. And by the way, like he's also a dynamite pass catcher as well. One of the first highlights I have was him hurdling a defensive player for Penn State on a touchdown run in the playoff game last year in 2024. So he has got outstanding upside as a two-way player at the position. To me, like when you talk about like archetype, he's like Brock Bowers type of player. He's like Brock Bowers type of athlete and physical specimen. That's what we're talking about here with him, but it's just a smaller runway of proven college production because he was a backup behind a senior-laden group ahead of him last year with Oregon.
Wow, I am absolutely sold on him. I was already sold on him coming in, Fran. You just absolutely sold me on him. And really quick, I just want to remind everyone about your Die Hard draft guide because it is absolutely incredible. It's such a resource. I've been diving in with it over these past couple of weeks trying to get knowledge of the draft. And man, has it helped me so much. And everyone gets access to that if you're a Die Hard over at thednvr.com.
Yeah, I'm curious about Siddiq. Because I want to like him. There's just enough of the things so he averaged 40 receiving yards per game this year. There have been 29 first-round tight ends since the year 2000 who've been drafted, like I said, in the first round. 26 of them have more than 40 yards per game in their last year. Only 3 of them have less. And like that level of production, and they had like the other tight end who kind of surpassed him when you get into the postseason. And he's not the biggest tight end either. And so I have those little concerns about him as a blocker. Again, like you use him true in line, run powers and that sort of stuff. And then also, can we trust that he actually is that receiver? Because as a first round tight end, you need him to be that guy. And this is a long one, but he kind of reminds me of like a Harold Fannin when you say like get him out in space and he can block a little bit. And that obviously worked out. So by draft day, I want to be sold. But as of now, I just can't quite get there. Are you concerned about the production in that way?
Oh, no, because of this. I think if you look at a lot of the best players at the position, around the NFL, production is not a predictor for success at this position. And he only had 80 career catches. To your point, like the production was kind of up and down, even just this past season. But, I'm looking at some of the top players at the position. You look at George Kittle. He had let's see, he had 48 career catches at Iowa, right? And he started 17 games. So we're talking like same kind of sample size and almost half the amount of catches. You look at Mike Gesicki, he had 130 catches, but then you go down and it's like, all right, TJ Hawkinson had fewer catches than what we're talking about here with Sadiq. Sam Laporta wasn't like always extremely productive at Iowa. And I'm going down the list here. A lot of these guys that are at the top of the position, and I'm doing this on the fly. I'll make sure I insert this into the draft guide though, because the big knock on him has been the consistency of production. But man, like that to me, like this has become a traits position in the NFL. The guys that are really, really big or test really, really well, Siddiq is going to be one of those guys. And it's not just these pass catcher only. The fact that he can be a two-way player at the position, I think is really, really valuable.
Okay.
Going a little off the Broncos here, just because this was a big topic of discussion in the office the other day when we opened up your draft guide, which is you having Kellrick Faulk as your number 2 overall player in the class, which means I think you're the highest person in America on him. So I'm curious what it is. Why do you love him so much?
Yeah, Nate Tice and I, so Nate Tice over at Yahoo. Nate, I don't think he has him quite at number 2 at this point now. He and I both had number 1 on our board throughout the course of the fall. I had him on the podcast, on the All NFL Draft podcast back in, I want to say like October, maybe early November, and just kind of wax poetic about him. RK, I think what I like most about Kellrick Faulk is the profile is pretty peerless, man. Like he has not been overly, like the production is the biggest knock, but he's extremely disruptive. He's long. For a guy who's 280 pounds, like he is explosive. I'm like really excited to see him test. Great character, 2-year captain as a junior, extremely young, doesn't turn 21 years old until the fall, until the season begins. He's got a clean medical record. He lines up inside, outside. He does all the dirty work. Guys that have been through that program all rave about him as former teammates. Opponents also say, yeah, this guy's one of the toughest guys to block in the SEC. Coaches all rave about him internally, and then again, externally. To me, like that is a profile where I am willing to buy on in terms of what he could be down the road. The way I kind of look at it is this: when I stack him up against some of the other edge rushers in this class, I've got major questions. I'm like, I don't know if David Bailey is going to be a 3-down player, right? Like, I don't know if Arvell Reese is going to be able to fully hit his ceiling as a rusher. I feel like Kellrick Faulk is going to get there. It might take a year, but I think he's going to get there, right? Like I feel more confident about it. So when I look at Faulk and I stack up all these factors, yeah, I'm going to be higher on him than consensus. He's a player that I absolutely will be sticking my neck out on when it comes to this class.
Well, my guess is, Fran, he's going to be jumping up a lot of people's draft boards after next week. So you were on top of it first. My final one for you here. We had this conversation earlier this week, and you're the best person to answer this question. So I want to ask you, who right now, and I know this is a difficult question to answer, but who right now is the best player that you could reasonably see fall to the Broncos at pick 30?
The best player I could see fall. Give me 1 second. So the way I'm looking at, I don't think Siddiq makes it down to 30. So I'm looking at the rest of this group here. I think that when you look at the cluster, because typically what happens in a situation like this, it's one of 2 scenarios. It's either you have a tight cluster in the back end of the round where I look at offensive tackle and say, all right, well, you have Caden Proctor, you have Monroe Freeland, you have Maxie Honachor from Arizona State, you have Caleb Lomo, you have a bunch of guys that all could go, and then it's just a matter of what order do they go in, and you might have it third, this guy at the top of the stack, and everybody else had him lower, and so then he falls to you, right? Like there's that scenario, or there's a run at another position, and that forces other guys to fall. I think of Kenyon Mitchell falling to the Eagles a couple of years ago. I didn't think there was any way Kenyon Mitchell was going to follow him. And honestly, I don't think the Eagles thought Kenyon Mitchell was going to. They were in talks that try and move up to get Kenyon Mitchell, but there were runs at other positions that bumped him down the board. And so when I look at that, I say, all right, well, could that be a situation where like Sonny Styles makes it that far? To me, that would be really surprising. I think that Sonny Styles is one of the 10 best individual talents, maybe one of the 5 best individual talents in this draft. But at that position, you get a team here, a team there that passes on him. There's a run at tackle, there's a run at pass rusher, and then all of a sudden he falls into your lap. Again, I find that unlikely, but that would be a name that would come to mind from that path.
So I think by the time the draft comes around, the Broncos will kind of have this year's needs covered. And so when you look ahead to what they could want to plan for next year, I think the biggest problem coming down the line is that they're going to be probably losing Ben Powers, starting left guard. And Sean Payton, a guy who wants to invest in the offensive line, it feels like they're kind of overdue to finally do that in the draft. When you look through, if I said I want somebody who maybe sits this year, maybe plays a bit this year, but can play some guard right away, eventually has the upside to maybe bounce out to tackle and could be there at 30. Who do you think kind of fits that mold?
Yeah, I would say there are a couple guys that stand out. If you want to go like potentially is there, but probably not. You would say like Caden Proctor would fit that. I ultimately think that Caden Proctor from Alabama, 3-year starter at left tackle, enormous, like huge physical specimen, outrageous power, inconsistent pass protector. A lot of people, and I honestly, I feel this way myself, probably better served kicking inside the guard in the league. I think he's going to go, even though he's had some ups and downs. I think he's going to go earlier than what we're talking about with the Broncos. So when I get past him, I think the next group of guys that I'd look at, Vega Ioane from Penn State, who's been a pure left guard, and he's played a little bit of right guard, but it's been mostly left guard throughout his career. I think that he would make some sense. My guess is, though, he ends up going. I think there are too many teams that are going to need offensive line help, and Ioane is the best pure guard in this class. So honestly, the guy that I would land on there would be Chase Bisontis from Texas A&M. This is a guy that is really athletic, but he's also like really thickly built. He kind of reminds me a little bit, honestly, of some players that Sean Payton had worked with in the past. I think of like Eric McCoy, a similar kind of body type. He played at center for A&M, but Bisontis is a similar kind of body type. Really fast off the ball, used as a puller, can be a weapon on the move, but also just really stout. And when his technique is right, he is one of the best pure blockers I've seen in this class. Equal parts run blocker and pass protector. I like what I've seen from Bisontis. I do think there's a little bit of boom bust there, but I think ultimately that's a guy that has that kind of that upside that you'd be looking at late in the first round.
There's the franchise telling us everything we need to know. Can't wait to catch up, maybe even on a weekly basis, Fran, because you just have so much fantastic insight. We appreciate you joining us, and make sure that everyone goes and checks out Fran's draft guide over at the DNVR.com. Thank you, Fran.
See you, Fran.
Appreciate it, guys. Talk soon.